I have had the temerity to ask for 2 slots at this conference because I am really, honestly, pretty concerned and upset, perhaps even, about a couple of things in our deliberations. The first is that when you think that we now have 50 years of thinking and insight, which is perhaps typified in this room tonight, into the way the systems work and all the subtleties that we like to investigate, that we have done very, very little to affect the course of history out there, if there is an out there, excuse me. There is an out there to me because of people who are starving and dying. It comes to that. And it disturbs me that we do not address ourselves to these problems more than we do. Now, second question is, well, why not? And I'm pretty clear about that too. After 50 years of this kind of thinking, we are supposed to have discovered a number of fundamental scientific principles. They used to be called laws of nature. I don't want to be subtle about the metaphysics of this. Ideas that seem to be pertinent, that seem to be shared. And again, I do not see the principles that I thought we'd established years and years ago commonly cropping up in all sorts of applications. So I thought, well, I know some of these principles, and I have picked on just 2, isn't many, which I just want to mention briefly to remind you that we know these things. And then I shall try and apply these 2 things first in the context of sociopolitics, if you will, the out there where people are starving and dying. And then on Saturday night, to show that these principles are universal, very deliberately I have chosen to talk to you about the spiritual domain of the individual. I feel you couldn't get more orthogonal than that. So, what are these principles? The first is the concept of variety. Ross Ashby defined as the number of possible states of a system. Why do we not use this very powerful measure notion more than we do? We are all sunk into pounds and dollars and man-hours and all the typical measures that society has developed, which turn out to be no good for any damn thing. And here we have, as cyberneticians, the notion of complexity that is an actual measure called variety, the number of possible states of a system. Well, my students say to me, this is all pretty well. You are talking about the third world and you want the number of states of the system. I've lost count. The point is about variety, as I will try and show you this evening, that it is a relative measure. I'm not a bank manager. I don't care if there's 5 cents unaccounted for. What I care is whether this guy is living or dead as the result of my insane actions on the International Monetary Fund. Now, if we can use the measure of variety somehow to indicate this, we shall have done something. So I say to these rebellious students, here I have a coat, and I hold up a coat, and I pick on 2 unlikely customers in the class, one of whom is very short and the other of whom is very tall. And I say, does anybody know to whom this coat may be given? And everybody says, him. I say, how do you know? You haven't measured him, you haven't measured the coat, you don't know the variety involved, but all of you say it's him. And the answer is because relative measure is something we can indeed handle. I can say, yes, the new piece of furniture will fit into that. But if I had to say that alcove is this number of feet and inches long and this piece of furniture is this number of feet and inches long, I bet I wouldn't get it right. Because I can't actually measure either. But I can see the relative effect. So this is variety, and I would like us to use it more. And why? Because of the principle of requisite variety, Ashby's law. Now, we have that principle that only variety can absorb variety. Whenever I met Ross, he would say to me, because I was supposed to be a manager in those days and know about world affairs, why on earth, Stafford, are they doing this, having read this morning's Times or whatever, when it is obvious that that can't possibly work because it hasn't got requisite variety. And this goes for crime, it goes for economics, it goes for the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Come on. And then I very well remember the day and wish to mention it when I received in the mail a copy of the famous Conant-Ashby theorem. And the note, my voice is breaking a bit because I remember the note from Ross. Who said, the Conant-Ashby theorem says that if a system is under the control of a regulator which doesn't have enough variety, which doesn't equate with the variety of the system to be controlled, it's not going to work. And you may say, well, this is obvious. Then why the hell do we disobey it all the time? It's weird.
Is this back time? This is the requisite variety song.
Broken lines, broken strings, broken threads, broken springs, broken idols, broken heads, people sleeping in broken beds. Ain't no use trying, ain't no use joking.
Sing it.
Everything is broken.
So that is the first of the principles I wanted to remind you of, Ashby's law, as I always call it. And I have always said, and I've said from the very beginning, I think sometimes to Ross's embarrassment, that Ashby's law is to management as Newton's law of gravity is to physics. It is that fundamental, and none of the papers I see around these days ever mention it. Now, take a look at this. Do you remember I said that the variety would go up, and spurning the bank manager's approach, I said, well, let's call the variety coefficients 1, 2, 3. Well, I have news for you. That was actually a Fibonacci series and not an arithmetic series. And why? Because things in nature don't work in arithmetic series, they work in Fibonacci series. And so by the time we come to category B, we find to our dismay that we've got 5V, 8V, and 13V coming out of the series 1, 2, 3. Now, if anybody wants to shoot me because I can't prove those numbers, the hell with you, frankly. Of course I can't prove the numbers. I'm trying to show the use of the relative notion of requisite variety. Obviously, we've got less variety to play with now because these people do not have the resources that the elite had. And so they are being under more pressure. Now, how do you deal with that? Now, the other principle that I want to refer to, you see, has been demeaned. All our words get demeaned once the media get hold of them. I remember science being demeaned back in the 50s. Everybody was talking about, this is a scientific toothpaste. Yeah. And now today, what about system? The perfect hair removal system. You used to call it a razor. So system is being demeaned, and now I come to my second word. After variety, my second word is feedback. Now that was something that the very early people in Heinz's time with the Josiah Macy Foundation were on about all the time, the ubiquity of feedback. And what does it mean now? It means a response. Give me some feedback on this. A mere response. So nobody understands the point. Why have I called my social political talk a bleeding shine? I was brought up in the 30s in a middle-class family in Britain, and I was aware that there were problems called the Depression. They didn't mean very much to me because I was protected. I got into the army in the Second World War, and I ran slap full tilt into the realities of poverty and so on. And there was a song we used to sing in the army, and if you can't bear this, cover your ears for the next 3 seconds or whatever it is. I will sing you the chorus. It's the same the old world over. It's the poor what gets the blame. It's the rich what gets the pleasure. Ain't it all a bleeding shame? Hence the title. It is a bleeding shame. It really is, you know. And here we are in Britain with the gap between the rich and the poor steadily widening all the time as to income, as to actual wealth. Same thing is happening in the United States. And everybody says, oh. Now, why on earth should this be? Given episodes of quite liberal thinking, small l, in governments in both countries, it is because we have structured a system, not understanding the principle of requisite variety, not understanding this feedback phenomenon, which is dedicated to producing this effect. I think that one should always consider when you look at a system which you say, oh, this is going wrong, how do we put it right? You should start by saying, why have we designed this stupid system to do the wrong thing? Now, I see that all the time in management, in social systems, and what I have said about Britain and the United States, of course, applies internationally much, much more. The third world is, again, a victim of this phenomenon, whatever it may be, because we just go on getting worse and worse. Did you see the results of the poll in America last week, I think it was, or maybe the week before, where people were asked, do we spend too much in overseas aid? Everybody said yes. The next question was, what percentage of the budget do we spend on overseas aid? Everybody said 15 to 20%. They said, well, what would you think was a reasonable amount to spend? They said, well, 5% perhaps. Well, you know perfectly well the actual percentage is about 0.06. That is what I mean by the power of the paradigm. I'm just thanking Chicho for laying that terrific foundation on the nervous system, which I shall be able to use later. Who was Philip Larkin? He was a British poet, and he became very famous for 4 lines. And when the poet laureate John Bageman died, it was said that Larkin was approached to become the new poet laureate because he was one of the top people. And he apparently said, he was quite a right-wing person, he apparently said that because of these 4 lines, he felt that Her Majesty might be embarrassed if he were put up as Poet Laureate, and he declined. And they made Ted Hughes Poet Laureate instead. What were these 4 lines? Well, if you fear that you have the same sensitivity as the Queen, just put your hands over your ears. I sang to you the other night, I'm going to recite 4 lines to you tonight. The Larkin Loop. Ladies and gentlemen, they fuck you up, your mum and dad. They never mean to, but they do. They give you all the faults they had and add some extra just for you. I have brought up 8 children, and I can only treat it lightheartedly. Like that. You know, people say 8 children. You know, when I had 8 children, it was the socially responsible idea to do it. And by the time popular thought had changed to being socially irresponsible, the little dears had grown up considerably, and I got very fond of them. I couldn't really shoot them.